anyone can become a designer, but not everyone can become. Like, if you are able to get to 10,000, the network effects of that is enough to change the design scene in India. Why do we need a word for it? Why do we need creativity? Why can't we just create? Like, this is the kind of stuff that I probably would not be thinking about on an everyday basis when I'm at an academy managing the team and everything. Airtribe has really helped us figure out how do we bring that quality experience, standard processes to something that's so abstract and conceptual. Yeah. But a core belief that we have at 10K is cohort once, community forever, which is we've designed it in such a way that these 3-4 months are your launchpad into the 10K ecosystem, but also the broader tech design ecosystem. Swiggy,
Swiggy is one,
Zomato,
Cred 2,
Urban Company. Our outcomes are anywhere from around 70%. 70% of people have got a new job within their own company. They've now gone to a more design or creative role. A lot of them now have the confidence to go even deeper in freelancing. A lot of them now, now that the community exists, a lot of them start stuff together. The very simple thing that you can do is spend an entire weekend going through the official Figma tutorials, learning Figma, but learning it to make something. That's bad design. I'm sure each of us has examples of this. Government portals are one. Organizations do over time kind of become a little bit more extractive, like value goes to shareholders. But with design, it's like, can you consistently have that user-centered focus in every single touch point with your brand?
So Abhinav, good to have you on the podcast finally.
Yes, excited.
So we'll start with the origin story of 10K itself. 10K Designers has been around for more than 3 years now.
Yes.
I would love to know more about the origin and also why the name 10K. Why not 100K or 1000K?
Yeah. So I started this about 3.5 years back. And this was, to give a moment in time, this was, the pandemic had just started and I had just quit my job at Unacademy because I was like, okay, I need something remote. I want to now come back to doing my own startup. And of course, I didn't know a couple months later, pandemic would kick in and everything, goes down. But I think Jan is when I started. And the term 10K started actually 2 years before that, which is when I first started on YouTube. My main motive was, let's understand the life of an educator, behaviors of an educator, because on Academy, we were doing a lot of designing for tools, learner side, educator side. And I think the main learning at Unacademy was that, having been in the startup scene, I was always like, okay, I want to be a founder. That's the main thing, right? That's the big game that I eventually want to play. And tried a bunch of stuff around that. But at Unacademy, I was like, wait, I didn't even consider this new persona that's exists, which is now educators. And so I was really interested in learning more about that. And I thought, what better way than to just start posting on YouTube, get into that mindset of what does an educator feel, how do they receive feedback, how exactly does online education work on a YouTube level. On Academy, yes, we were doing a lot of live stuff. But so the name 10K actually came from YouTube. We started this channel. Started a playlist, and just the general idea was, from my research, and of course, through hiring at Unacademy, hundreds of profiles, I looked into it and I realized that the main colleges in India, right, the biggest design colleges, so let's say NID, maybe NIFT, IIT Bombay's design program, they have really small batch sizes. Like in a year, you would probably, don't quote me on this number, but I think it's like 40, 50 a year. Right? And given that it's in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad, in Bombay, quite disconnected from the startup scene. Yes, they do teach process, design and all of this, but it was quite disconnected. And so just from that perspective, the kind of realization I had was, okay, there's not enough designers actually. And in fact, there was a recent study as well. I think the Ken wrote an article on this, which is in India, for every 1,000 engineering graduates, there's one design graduate. Like, so very, very skewed. And so the whole idea was, how do we create not just, okay, YouTube mein 3-4 designer ban gaye, 100 designers ban gaye, but we need to actually create a systemic impact. Like, how do we actually bring designers? It can't just be a few and then you forget about it. So I just set that goal, okay, let's do 10,000. And my thinking, based on my calculations a little bit here, is design is one of those things that is kind of still in the country a big question mark. like especially for parents, for most people you meet, like they don't fully know what design is. Maybe graphic design, interior design, but especially not design products. And so the idea was we need deep network effects for people to be like, okay, we are going to propagate design. And so for those network effects, I realized we need 10,000 designers. And that's if we are able to get to 10,000, the network effects of that is enough to change the design scene in India. And it's also enough to position India as a design leader globally. Like over the last few decades, India is definitely seen as, okay, a lot of legendary devs, CEOs, and of course, dev shops, outsourcing has been the trend with globalization, but it's never been seen as a creative capital, or like you've got designers here. Like I remember I worked on a freelance project and the client was just so shocked. He's like, my developer's in New York and you, my designer, are in India. I would have never expected this. I would expect the reverse. So 10,000 is what we came up with. That's the seed group that we would need. Because once we get 10,000, getting to 100K and a million, relatively easier. And now 3.5 years in, we are 10% of the way. So our alumni base just hit 1,000 designers.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we're already seeing the network effects. Like just now that you have this group that is so tightly connected, you're seeing these emergent properties. So that's the whole idea behind it.
Got it. Let's come back to design. Let's talk about creativity here. How creativity and design are related, and what it means to be creative, according to you.
Yeah. Being creative is something that's not specific to a designer. As engineers, you do have to be creative. Any field, there is a certain aspect of it, it might be big or small, that requires you to be creative. And when I say creative, let's break that down. It's to create. And that sounds like the most normal thing. Like creating is, of course we create. That's just what humans do. But why do we need a word for it? Why do we need creativity? Why can't we just create? And like this is the kind of stuff that I probably would not be thinking about on an everyday basis when I'm at an academy managing the team and everything. We're just like, let's be outcome focused. But I have to think about this because when you are in this environment where you're teaching people from all parts of India, all different types of backgrounds, you notice how the same thing lands differently based on the person. And that's when you realize the blockers to actually creating. To you and I, having built our careers, to create is natural.
Yeah.
But somebody, let's say, who comes from the Indian school system, to create is almost synonymous with to create a problem. Because in a classroom, you're supposed to conform. Creating something doesn't really happen. It's more of processing something rather than creating something. So I would say with creativity, overall, it's a very abstract concept, right? So I don't want to kind of give gyan or something like that. But creativity is just to create. But most people are not in the position to create. And usually it's mindsets, beliefs, blockers, thinking about the world, like, ye kya hoga, isme kya, or being too outcome focused, like, oh, will this even succeed? Will this even get me a job? Will this even this thing? Or I don't even think I'll be as good as. And then so all these reasons, okay, I might as well not try. So I think creativity it's creativity, but then as an educator, it's about unlocking that creativity. And it's not just true for design, but the best leaders as well give you that freedom of space to not think about, not be caught up in these things and just be able to channel that into the work that you do.
That means everyone has some sort of creativity within them, but it has to be unlocked. And it is the job of leaders to actually identify and unlock it somehow.
Because every organization, what's the goal? Yeah, it's to make money and all this, but it's to create value.
Yeah.
And creating value is not something one person does. The whole every single person in the organization needs to create value. And what that means for a different department, a different person is very different. So I think every leader, whether they know it or not, this is a big part that they're playing.
So people always think of Apple as that company which is very creative, very innovative. But I think the company that doesn't get as much recognition as it deserves is probably Samsung. The only company, in my view, building smartphones which has really innovated in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
I still remember the story of when the first Samsung Fold came out, and it was breaking for a lot of people, and it had to be brought back.
Yes.
But now they are in the 5th iteration, and they are the only company doing something like that really well, and they are more expensive than iPhones.
True.
And people pay
Yes.
a lot of money just to get those interesting fold and flip devices, which anyone else could have done, but that required them to be bold, creative,
Yes.
innovative,
Yes.
and not just follow the lead of Apple.
True. And I think creativity is all about taking risks.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy for us to say, oh, be creative and all this, but when you're really faced with the scenario of will the market accept this, will my users accept this, it's very easy to just fall back into let's do the safe thing because this is too much of a risk. But organizations that can create that space where risk taking is not just encouraged, but it's the norm, it's not a big deal, because India is very risk averse. Even in school and everything, there are traditional paths, and if you are standing out, which is taking that risk, you are either on one end of the extreme where you're the topper and you don't care about everybody else and you can zone out and stay focused to your goal, or you're in the opposite end where you're the backbencher where you're creating a problem, right? But the default, the median, is no risks, do what's told. And I think that's a culture shock that people have, especially Bangalore, coming to startups, is like, wait, you're telling me to take a risk, but what if I go wrong? Because you're fearing the consequences of this thing based on what's happened in the past. So risk, yes, great example with Samsung.
Yeah. But the good news is, when you talked about Bangalore and people coming and taking risks here, I think there are cities, countries, and cultures which celebrate risk taking.
Yeah.
A bit more than others. For example, in Bangalore, I think many people are more likely to become entrepreneurs because they think if they fail, they will get a job.
True.
It's not the same if you are living in, let's say, something like Jaipur or Lucknow or Bhubaneswar or whatever, because there are not that many opportunities.
Yeah.
And this is something I have sensed because I have spent some time in different cities. When you are in San Francisco, Bay Area, or Bangalore, you just start becoming more like people around you, and more people are risk taking.
True.
And bold, and it has a lot to do with the culture that these cities have.
Yes.
And I also think in terms of countries, some countries have a lot more startups than others, partly because the culture in that country is okay with people failing.
True.
So I think India is very interesting for me because most of us went to school and college in India, and we had to play safe. Everyone first had to become an engineer before they did anything else. But then we arrived in Bangalore, and thankfully the startup scene had arrived around the same time since Flipkart days. And I think more of us grew much faster because of the overall ecosystem and the speed with which it was growing and learning.
True.
We talked about creativity. Now let's talk about, can anyone be a designer? Because one of the issues I see is there are some very very loved cohort programs, learning programs which talk about helping you become a designer. But then there is a segment of people who always question that not everyone can be. And I would love to know your views, because you have seen about 1,000 people going through the cohorts. So,
and many more who did not make it because we have an invite process, an application process.
Yeah. And even there, I think not everyone who would join the program would become a designer.
Yes.
And everyone take different amount of time to become a designer.
Yeah.
So, I just want to hear your perspective.
Yeah, good question. I think my core belief around this, anyone can become a designer, but not everyone can become a designer. And what exactly is the difference? It's if you have that that desire, whether it's external or internal, if you have that desire for, I don't want to be a receiver of tech, I want to be the creator of tech, right? Tech, and when I say tech, I'm talking about the internet, smartphones, tech services that play a big part for life, food delivery, all of this stuff. Most of the world, and that's just how it is a receiver of tech. They're not creating the tech, right? So, but if you look at a young person growing up today, they don't remember a time pre-social media. They don't remember a time pre-smartphones, pre-internet. In fact, if you go even younger, they don't remember a time before Bitcoin, right? All these technologies, when you're born in that generation, it becomes the norm. Like an example of this would be when we look at, let's say, TikTok videos, and it's like, these split screen, Family Guy, Subway Surfers, soap kaat rahe hain. It's like, whoa, what the fuck is this? Like, so overstimulating. But to somebody who grew up, that's like, oh, that's the normal thing.
Yeah.
It's almost like how our parents or grandparents might look at the internet and be like, ye to bahut jadui cheez hai. But to us, it's like, it's a Google search.
Yeah.
What do you mean? It's normal. So coming back to the question, anyone can become a designer, but not everyone can. In some ways, almost like a natural law, which is power law, or you can say online communities have this thing, which is the 99-1 principle, which is 90% of people are consumers, maybe 9% are curators, which is they engage, and then 1% are creators. And this is a law of the internet that's true for any internet community, Reddit, Twitter, whatever. Most people are lurkers, right? They are the beneficiaries. They receive it rather than the other way around. So anyone can become a designer, but it requires this flip, which is, my whole life has been shaped by technology. I don't remember a time pre these technologies, but it takes a conscious shift, which is, I don't want to be on the receiving end. I want to figure out what's the code behind the matrix, right? What exactly are the forces that are controlling and shaping my world? And once that shift happens, that's when you are ready to receive. That's when you're open to, okay, let's figure it out. It's not just at that point, it flips from being a theoretical karna hai because ye safe path hai, karna hai because bade bhaiya ne kaha hai, ye field mein scope hai and all this. It becomes like a personal need. It's like I need to do this so that I can understand my life. I can understand what is shaping the world exactly. And I want to see the code behind this matrix. So anyone can become a designer. And this sounds like a very abstract thing but this mindset shift, once you have it, you will figure out Figma. You will take an interest in technologies. What are the latest startups? What's happening in AI? What's happening in Web3? Because then it becomes a personal hunger to just figure it out for yourself. So anyone can do this shift. But realistically, I don't think everybody can do this. Not everybody will have this shift. Most people, just statistically speaking, will stay consumers of technology.
Maybe if they start on this path, they will become a little more curious, and would be able to appreciate more whatever products they are using on day-to-day basis. But like you are saying, if it's just 1% that ends up becoming creators, so it's a leap. And some people make it, some people don't. Which brings me to my...
But just a small interruption. Might just stay 1%, but if the total base increases,
that 1%
we've got
can
billions
be huge.
of users coming.
Yes,
that 1% will be huge. Like in terms of media, India is way ahead of the rest of the world. Like the content and ecosystem in India, insane, way crazier than it is abroad. Like we might look at the US and stuff, but given the fact that the population of the internet will soon be predominantly Indian, the content stuff that's happening in India is a big reflection of that. Like people want to create, people want to have a voice, and finally they have a low barrier, a way of doing it.
These cohort programs that we have been talking about, they usually last 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. 10K itself lasts 3 months. At Airtribe, 10K is one of 10K. We collaborate with 10K on the program, but we also have our own programs where they are 3 months, 4 months long.
Yes.
My question to you would be, are 3 months enough for someone who knows nothing about design to become a designer and also get a role as a designer?
Good question. I think talking purely from a CBC's perspective, 3 months is actually a long time. Like looking at just the space in general, cohort-based courses are typically a week to a month. 2 months is like, okay, you're getting serious. 3 months is like, I'm spending 25% of my entire year with you guys. Like,
Yeah.
it's a kind of a big thing. And more than 3 months is like, okay, like this is significant. So we are definitely, our course as well, it's 3 months, but in fact, we're going to make it officially a 4-month thing. Now that we have enough iterations, we figured out what could we improve. Definitely on the higher end, but your question around, is it enough time? For maybe somebody who's a beginner as well, will I get enough? I think the way I see it is, most people, like even outside of CBCs and stuff, most people do learn on the job. The amount of information overload we have means that there is no fixed syllabus that you can complete in a fixed amount of time.
Yeah.
If the syllabus becomes infinite and is constantly every single day expanding, then your approach needs to change, right? Usually in college, we have a fixed syllabus, and that's why fixed time is okay. But when the syllabus is infinite, it's more important that you build that habit of never stopping to learn, and learning not becoming like a scary thing, but like just a normal part of your life. Like that's more important, that habit. So what I see cohort-based courses as, it's the rite of passage into the broader field of design. Rite of passage for a lot of people who are small towns who are now want to move to, let's say, Bangalore, Delhi, Bombay. It's the rite of passage to building a network in these big cities. It's the rite of passage in a very psychological way as well, which is, I can tell my parents I am not just messing around on the internet. मैं actually कुछ कर रहा हूँ, right? Your parents have to give you that ashirwad, so to say, कि, कर दो, it's okay. We're not going to stop you because we know that you are learning.
Yeah.
So is it enough? Of course, everybody has their own journeys. It is enough for a lot of people because they figure it out on the way. But a core belief that we have at 10K is cohort once, community forever. Which is, we've designed it in such a way that these 3-4 months are your launchpad into the 10K ecosystem, but also the broader tech design ecosystem. And beyond that, we've created multiple ways for people to keep engaging. Technically, you could be a part of 10K designers and be active in it every single day, every single week, every month, every quarter for the next 10, 20 years, as long as we are running. But from a design perspective, having this long customer life cycle does require you to get really deep into who are you doing it for, what are their motivations. So it's definitely enough.
Yeah.
It's a rite of passage. It's a canon event in your life that kind of is now, you kind of fully kind of commit and get in. And, in terms of information, you will never be 100% done. So I think what's important is the habit, which is why we've got, we do the cohorts, but we also have weekly sessions, monthly events and all this stuff, annual Bangalore grad parties and everything, as a way to keep you here so that, you can keep making friends, keep making connections, get the opportunities that come to our network, jobs, freelance projects, and that safe space of a university or whatever can kind of stay with you in your pocket for a very long time.
Yeah, I think that analogy that you have, not analogy, but the simplification that you put forward, cohort once, community forever, that makes things very, very clear. Still, the second part of the question was, for people who do, for people who come to the program to become designers.
Yes.
So let's talk about the people who actually become designers after doing the program.
Yes.
On average, how much time it takes? Do you have some numbers there?
Yeah, for sure. So first, the 3-4 months of the cohort is very, very immersive experience. You really have to just immerse yourself in it. Once the cohort is done, so it's a build up like this, and then there's a gradual down like this, but never to 0. After the cohort is done, it takes people another quarter, so to say. So the cohort is 1 quarter of your year. It takes people another quarter to just synthesize this and kind of get their case studies out, get their portfolio out. Now that they have this bank of stuff that they worked on, it's like, okay, now I need to actually put this out there. So that's when they start putting stuff. And since we have this cohort ones community forever, we help boost your stuff. Like we will help, retweet, repost type of stuff. But also behind the scenes, we are making a lot of connections, referrals, even LORs if you want to go abroad, helping you kind of figure out the freelancing thing if you kind of are setting up your own business. So it does take people, to directly answer, 3-4 months is the cohort. It does take another 3-4 months to get all this together. This is where typically people start interviewing. And first few interviews are always the hardest.
Yeah.
But then the cohort has been designed to also make you comfortable talking to new people. And, just being comfortable actually having a voice on the internet and not just being the median of the classroom who's just sitting quietly. So 3-4 months is what it takes. And typically what we've seen is a year from cohort date, our outcomes are anywhere from like around 70%. 70% of people have got a new job within their own company. They've now gone to a more design or creative role. A lot of them now have the confidence to go even deeper in freelancing. A lot of them now that the community exists, a lot of them start stuff together. But given that we're not a boot camp, we don't force you to get a job. That doesn't exist. We say, yes, a job is the dominant path. But if you have that inclination to these other paths, we will help you figure that out too.
That's incredible. So basically the outcome could be getting a job, outcome could be getting a freelance project, outcome could be just getting more design projects in your current role.
Yes. And so the 70% mark that I'm saying, in fact, some of our older cohorts, they're already at 80%, 85% outcomes. So when I say 70, 80%, it's people actually making money from this skill.
Got it.
But the world we live in, creator economy as well as the great online game that we're playing, there's not one way to make money anymore.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of ways. And so with design, we don't really say that we'll do placements and we will do it for you. It's like, we don't want to give you a fish, we want to teach you to fish. And so that means we help you build the skill of demand generation. How do you self-advertise? Having lived abroad for a while now, it's very common in US, to some extent in Europe, to self-advertise.
Yeah.
You have to self-advertise and talk about yourself, network with yourself. In India, the self-advertising is a kind of a taboo. Because it's like, if I do this and I stand out, I'm more scared of what are the negatives than excited about what are the positives.
Log kya
bolenge? So the whole program, and not just like a session theoretically bana diya, but experientially, it's unlocking that and helping people get very comfortable. And so one of the reasons we have such good outcomes is because people are like, I don't need to rely on anybody else.
Yeah.
It's actually all in my control. It's been in my control. It's just, I was too scared to even, there was something holding me back.
So Abhinav, we talked a lot about design, designers, careers. What is important for our audience to know is your perspective on what is good design. And maybe you can also talk about what is great design, because good design in my view is table stakes these days.
Yeah.
For a product to work, to be accepted by the market. So I would love to know both, what is good design according to you, what is great design according to you, and preferably with examples.
Yeah. So I think first I can talk about what is bad design. Because good, great, harder to understand. Bad, everybody can understand.
Okay, we can start from there,
Bad,
but you will have to give examples.
Sure. Bad design is design that does not serve the users. It serves the organization. It serves, basic task completion ये होना चाहिए हो जाएगा, but it's design that does not serve the user. And what I mean by that is, to give an example, like the most common example, let's say something like government portals.
Yeah.
Now, let's say I'm trying to pay tax, or I'm trying to book something, or MCA portal, OTP and all this stuff. It's a complicated system for sure in the real world. The real world is complicated. No way getting around that. But with design, what happens is there's this thing called the law of complexity of design, which is imagine there's just a level here. Is the complexity this side or is it on this side? Which is complexity in the real world exists. So the law of complexity states that complexity cannot be reduced, or, you cannot make things less complex by forcing it, but you can figure out who do you pass it on to. Is it the user who has to figure out, so it's above the line?
Yeah.
Or is it the team and the people who build it who figure it out? So to come back to the government portals example, of course it's complicated, right? We're a huge country with so many moving parts. Complicated for sure. But when you're not user-centered, it means you let them figure out the complexity. Like, bro, हमने तो पोर्टल पे डाल दिया. हम तो ऐसे फ्लैशिंग लाइट्स डाल रहे हैं कि यहाँ न्यू मार्की हो रहा है. हमने तो सारे अपडेट दे दिए, राइट? हमारी तरफ से कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, हमने तो सब कर दिया. But you are shirking responsibility. You are saying you figure it out. And that's why the middleman culture exists in India, right? Like if we cannot figure it out, despite having, reading English and everything, it's much, much harder for, let's say, somebody in the village who might not fully understand these systems. So I think good design is something that serves the user. Of course, you have to serve the organization and figure out all of this. That's bad design. I'm sure each of us has examples of this. Government portals are one. But then it's just, where does it come from? It's not that the government does not want the best, right? So for example, with newer initiatives like UPI, it's simple, right? So just to take an example, if you had to do a banwala or you're having chai or something like this 10 years ago, unless you have cash, how do you make a transfer? And the process for this, take the bank details. Bank details mean there's name, number, IFSC code, this thing.
Yeah.
Phone pe jao. In fact, phone pay net banking was probably not that good. Wapas ghar jao, desktop pay, log into your net banking, forgot password, need to have alphabets and whatever. Okay, you log in, go through, find menus mein kahan, add payee. Payee has to be added. Check payee, check naam to nahi hua. IFSC, okay, checks the branch. Payee has been added. Wait 30 minutes to do a transfer. Wait 30 minutes. 30 minutes wait kar diya, theek hai. Now do it. Enter the amount. Make sure it's the right amount. Do it. Some people in this process are, I didn't register for net banking. So fir branch pe jao, submit that form request. Net banking will be activated in 3 to 4 business days.
Yeah.
Come back. Write it all. Write the amounts. Confirm this. Hit send. Confirm with OTP. All this. So the friction in this process, massive, right? But then banking systems are complicated. So from their perspective, it's like we are doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Because we don't want fraud. We don't want people to misuse the system. But then you're doing it at a cost to the customer. They have to figure all this out.
Yeah.
So the government is doing good initiatives with UPI. It's an email ID for sending money. That's what it is. And so you don't need to really think about this. You can just what's your UPI? In fact, not even what's your UPI. What's your phone number? And it's done. So UPI, good design, great design, in fact, from, governments, which are typically seen as bureaucratic and nahi karte, it's a good initiative. And we're seeing a lot more of these. Like, for example, ONDC trying to do that for e-commerce. You have things like Namayatri, which is doing that for transport.
In Bangalore, you may not get an auto or cab with Uber or Ola, but you will get it with Namayatri.
Yes. So to take just this example, since we're talking about Namayatri, Uber, they do take a significant cut, right? 40-50%, whatever.
I think it's close to 30%.
Okay.
Yeah.
US, in fact, it's 60%.
60.
Yeah.
I think it differs from market to market then.
Yeah. But the reason they can take 30% from a auto driver's livelihood for every single trip is because they've taken away complexity. They've kind of figured it out. The designers have figured out how to kind of hide, not eliminate complexity, but be user-centered, be user-focused. And for that value that they've created, they're taking a 30% cut on every single thing. But something like Namayatri, at least not fully used it, but I've heard about this. An auto driver in the morning pays 25 rupees and you can book as many, like no 0% transaction, as much as possible.
Yeah.
That is the government being very, very user-centered, which is why should your livelihood go to this international company that has, somewhat of a monopoly or hegemony over your life. And so these are examples of good design and great design, in fact. Instagram, WhatsApp, anything. We get a lot of benefits, right? We do talk about algorithms. They're bringing out the worst of us. They're sucking our attention. But the reason we continue to use these platforms is because they are giving value in our lives. In return, they're extracting, but they are giving value. So when you apply that now at a nation level, as citizens, are we customers? Does the government have to give us services? And for the tax we pay, it's the monthly subscription cost we pay to the government, the tax. We receive a lot and it's different for socioeconomically where you are, but we receive a lot from the government in return for the tax we pay. In some ways, a positive shift like that is happening is traditionally, like when you look at kingdoms and stuff, they're called subjects, right? Like you are the subjects, which is you are subject to the power of the king or like the divine right of rulers or something like that. But more and more, the positive shift that's happening is you are not an asset to just suck tax from, and you're not somebody who's a subject. You are a customer. If you are paying us, we need to give you value. And so that's the positive thing geopolitically that I feel is shifting. But the real example of that, Namayatri, right? It's, of course, you could have booked a cab normally. Of course, taxi drivers, bike taxis, Uber, this thing. Of course, they have a lot of, it's complex world.
Yeah.
They have fights and all of this stuff. But in the end, value is being created. And value is being created for an individual. And I think that is good design. That's great design. When we look at Apple, they've done that consistently over decades in every single product, and they've killed it. Like amazing stuff. When we look at, more, let's say, contemporary companies like Airbnb. Airbnb has customer journey maps, like massive customer journey maps, the size of the entire wall for every single persona that exists, host, the guest, other personas, whatever they might have. Entire journey maps visualizing what is once people are in our ecosystem, or even when they're not in the ecosystem. Maybe it just starts with, I want to go on vacation soon, or it's coming up soon. Then they start with the Google search, what should I do? Then they think about, I have family, so I do not want to just all be in a hotel room. They've got these really good journey maps that are organization-wide. And of course, Brian Chesky as a design founder, everything is a design problem to a design founder. That kind of creates that individual customer obsession, which is our 100th customer, our 100,000th customer, our millionth customer should all have a good and consistent and in fact improving experience, right? Because I think organizations do over time kind of become a little bit more extractive, like value goes to shareholders. But with design, it's like, can you consistently have that user-centered focus in every single touch point with your brand? Whether that's, the content you see in your reels, whether that's the booking that you do, whether that's, product managers, you've got entire cycles that they think about, acquisition, referral, retention. So to me, that is good design. Good design is design that serves the user.
That totally makes sense. But if you had to pick just two products in India, two of the best design products in India, what would those be and why?
I would say from a non-visual perspective, right? Also, the perception with good design is it needs to look good. Of course, it needs to look good, right? That's a part of the experience. I do think over the last decade, since smartphones and everything have been growing, Indian products have really good design, like way better than their global counterparts. So, when we use Swiggy, Zomato, Cred, we're kind of like, oh, like, yeah, it's good design, but it's a normal cheese hai, matlab. Like, especially somebody who started using Swiggy, let's say in the last 5 years, they won't say it's good design, it's oh badhiya. They're like, oh, it works, like it's nice, right?
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, good design to people outside of our bubble of product managers, designers, tech, good design is when it's invisible.
Yes.
It just kind of works. Yeah, it gives you delight. Yeah, the expectations it sets, it delivers on it. Yes, it helps smoothen your anxiety and stuff like, mera order aayega ya nahi, time ho gaya. Now you have a map. So when I say hard for me to pick just two, because I do think as a design ecosystem, we've really matured. I love the high frequency apps. So Swiggy.
Okay,
Cred,
Swiggy is one.
Zomato.
Cred, two.
Urban Company. Love the work they're doing. So that's consumer high frequency.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit more B2B. Love what Razorpay is doing. Love how they've made that business running so much simple.
Yeah.
We both of us use Razorpay. We know how much of a hassle it would have been without them. From a mass India perspective, I definitely do think initiatives like UPI. ONDC is still early, so not so sure about how that develops. Things like Namayatri, very good initiatives. And so we might not really look at it and be like, design badhiya hai iska.
Yeah.
But the fact that it exists, the fact that it works, and it's aligned for everybody, right? The fact that the auto driver can feel good about saying that, I'm not losing money on every ride. I am making that choice to come in the morning, buy that 25 rupees, and then it's up to me. Like giving that power, like instead of keeping that power and like kind of giving it to your users, like that's good design. So on a national level, really appreciate the recent developments.
Got it. So these are some of the products or companies aspiring designers should look up to.
Yes.
If they want to learn more about what's the state of the art and what consistently a good experience looks like.
Yeah.
Some of the products that you talked about are also some of my favorites. I think Urban Company is one of the more underrated ones, but probably one of the more useful ones that to come out in the last few years. We talked about design, but there is a lot of confusion both for aspiring designers and also sometimes experienced designers. What is design? What is product design? What is part of product design? What is not part of product design? Everyone has very strong views. So what do you think is product design versus design? And for somebody who is completely new to the field, where should they get started?
Got it. So looking back at the previous decade, product design meant physical products. And so a lot of institutes that you look at, when they say product design, they're talking about industrial design.
Yes.
It's physical products. The definition now has changed to not actually, when somebody says product design, you don't even think about physical products. You think about digital products.
Yeah.
So it's definitely the word kind of has been used for multiple things in the past. In some ways, it's also like the idea of spatial designer was a concept from architecture. Now spatial designer is soon going to become Apple spatial headset. Right? So these terms do change their meaning, which is what causes confusion and these generational kind of clashes of this is not this, this is not this. But I would say as a product designer, to put it in layman's terms, simple terms, you are going to be designing websites, apps, dashboards, everything around that. You might be working with developers, with marketing teams, with business teams, directly with founders. So from a very practical perspective, where should I start? What do I need to do? I'm thrown off by these abstract concepts, creativity and all this. Kitna kuch seekhne padega.
Yeah.
And it's not, once you start, you discover there's so much more. Simple thing for designers, the dominant tool today is Figma. The very simple thing that you can do is spend an entire weekend going through the official Figma tutorials, learning Figma, but learning it to make something. Make a banner for your Twitter profile.
Yeah.
Make a carousel post for your Instagram. It's more important that you make and publish, and do as many cycles of that to get comfortable than it is getting caught up in the vocab. So Figma, master it. It takes a weekend to just a weekend to kind of get a little bit comfortable, understand where everything is.
Yeah.
It takes maybe 2 or 3 weeks to make something that is, okay, it's not great, but like simple minimalist, I can make stuff now. It takes 2 or 3 months to be like, okay, it's not just one screen. Let's design an entire flow. How does, from onboarding, then I enter the OTP and then I wait for the OTP. If the OTP doesn't come, there's resend. So it goes back. If there is email, you have to add a forgot password.
Yeah.
So that's, once you get the basics of Figma, you start thinking about these things. Like, what are the edge cases here? What is the user going to perceive?
Mm-hmm.
So that's within 2-3 months, you start understanding, okay, like I understood the buttons. I've understood how to do auto layout. I've understood how to create simple UI components like lists, cards, screens. Beyond that 2 to 3 month mark, like let's say 3 to 6 months, is now when you start realizing there's a broader world outside this. But start with Figma for beginners. Start talking to other designers, because that really reduces the pressure of, my parents are saying, matlab, kya kar raha hai and all this. It also reduces the pressure for people who are transitioning. I do see a lot of, for example, software devs, product managers, architects, transitioning now into product design. For them as well, it's a very difficult thing to transition your career. Knowing that there are other people doing it, and not just random people on the internet, but people that, okay, I know them. Like we've talked, we've vibed on a certain level. I think that's where the community comes in. Network is super important. Tools, you will never learn all the tools. You will never use every single feature. Features are added every single month. But this kind of community is a kind of an asset that helps you as you kind of level up in life.
Thanks a lot, Abhinav, for coming to the podcast. I had a great time speaking with you for the last couple of hours, and we talked about a lot of things, and I still have so many more things to talk about, but I don't think we will be able to get into that now. But maybe the next episode.
Absolutely.